Think about the last time you opened your banking app. Did your stomach instantly drop, or did you actually feel a sense of relief? Most financial gurus love to scream about hitting $1 million, or they tell you that you're a complete failure if you don't make six figures. But they are completely ignoring a much smaller, highly explosive milestone that quietly transforms your entire psychological relationship with money. Once you cross this specific line, the daily anxiety drops, your options multiply, and your wealth finally begins to accelerate. That magic baseline is exactly $20,000. Most people treat this number like it's just a random stepping stone on the way to something bigger. But the reality is that $20,000 is the exact point where the rules of the financial game completely change. Everything before this number is a brutal uphill battle against gravity. Everything after this number feels like gravity is finally working in your favor. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Samay, and on this channel we break down the real, unvarnished mechanics behind building true wealth, financial psychology, and personal freedom. If you are tired of generic financial cliches and want to understand how money actually works in the real world, make sure to drop a like on this video and hit that subscribe button right now. Today we are diving deep into part 1 of why $20,000 is the ultimate invisible barrier in personal finance. We are going to look at the psychological shift, the cold hard math, and why hitting this threshold completely flips your brain from survival mode into growth mode. To understand why $20,000 is such a critical turning point, we first have to understand that building wealth does not move in a straight line. Most people assume that going from 0 to 10,000 takes the same effort as going from 10,000 to 20,000 or 20,000 to 30,000. But that's a massive misconception. Wealth building works exactly like a rocket launch. When a spacecraft is sitting on the launch pad, it requires an astronomical, violent amount of fuel, energy, and force just to lift off the ground and break through Earth's gravity. In fact, over 80% of the rocket's total fuel is burned in the first few minutes of the flight just to move it a few miles into the air. But what happens once that rocket breaks through the atmosphere and enters orbit? It glides through the vacuum of space smoothly, traveling thousands of miles an hour while using almost zero effort. Saving your first $20,000 is your financial escape velocity. Everything before this number feels exactly like that rocket trying to leave the pad. You are working exhausting hours, making sacrifices, skipping nights out, cutting back on your lifestyle, and yet when you look at your balance, it feels like you are making almost no progress. You are burning all your energy just to stay afloat, and it's easy to feel like it's a losing battle. But $20,000 is the exact atmospheric line. It is the turning point where you finally break through the heavy gravity of being broke. Everything after this number feels like gravity is finally working in your favor. Section 2, Conquering the Scarcity Mindset, the biggest and most profound shift. That happens when you reach $20,000 isn't actually on your spreadsheet or your bank statement. It's the literal rewiring of your brain. When you have zero savings or when you are living paycheck to paycheck, your mind is trapped in a permanent neurological state of survival. Psychologists call this a scarcity mindset. When you are in this state, every single daily decision you make is heavily filtered through fear. Think about how this plays out in real life. You tolerate a miserable, toxic boss or an abusive work environment because you literally cannot afford to miss a single paycheck. You stay in a terrible living situation or with a bad roommate because coming up with a first month's rent and a security deposit feels like an impossible mountain to climb. You stress out over micro decisions, like whether to order food delivery when you're exhausted or spend an hour cooking a basic meal, because a $20 swing feels like a total crisis. When you are in survival mode, your brain literally lacks the mental bandwidth to plan for next year, let alone next decade, because you are entirely consumed by trying to survive the next 7 days. It's like trying to plan a vacation while your house is actively on fire. But watch what happens to your psychology when you cross that $20,000 threshold. The smoke clears and the fire goes out. Data from major wealth management institutions like Vanguard shows that having an emergency fund of just $2,000 boosts an individual's perceived financial well-being by over 20%. $2,000 is less than the cost of a high-end laptop, yet it creates a massive psychological buffer. Now imagine scaling that up to a rock-solid 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for the average person sits right around that $20,000 mark. Suddenly, you aren't playing frantic defense anymore. You aren't constantly terrified of a flat tire, a broken phone, or an unexpected medical bill. You have built a psychological fortress that allows your brain to finally switch from defense to offense. You stop asking, "How do I survive?" and you start asking, "How do I grow?" Section 3, the razor-sharp mathematics of compounding. Now let's look at the actual math, because once you see the numbers, you can never unsee them. This is where the compounding acceleration becomes undeniable. Let's say you are hustling hard, staying disciplined, and putting away exactly $1,000 every single month into a diversified index fund, yielding an average historic 8% annual return. To stack up that very first $20,000, it is going to take you roughly 19 months of pure, unadulterated discipline and delayed gratification. That is more than a year and a half of saying no to immediate pleasures, staying focused, and grinding. It is a long, boring phase, and it is the exact phase where 90% of people lose hope, get distracted by a shiny object, and quit. But here is the mind-blowing part. Building your second $20,000 chunk does not take another 19 months. The timeline automatically drops down to around 17 months. Why does this happen? You didn't get a massive raise. You didn't double your hours. You put in the exact same $1,000 a month effort. The difference is that you didn't just save money, you built an army. You now have 20,000 tiny digital soldiers sitting in your investment account, working around the clock, compounding, generating dividends, and earning interest right alongside your manual hustle. You shaved 2 full months off the timeline simply because you had a baseline of capital working on your behalf. By the time you stay on this path and accumulate a serious portfolio, let's look down the road at $400,000, that exact same $20,000 increment generates itself completely automatically in just 5 months, without you having to lift a single finger or do a single minute of extra work. The acceleration is staggering, but you can never experience the speed of the later stages if you do not build the heavy foundational block of that very first 20,000. Hitting this specific milestone does something incredible. It completely rewires your personal identity. It shifts your focus from tiny micro expenses to massive macro wins, and it unlocks what I call walking away power at your job. Click the video card appearing on your screen right now. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a breakdown, and I will see you right over in part 2.